wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is I've spent my whole life trying to be something, which came out of a conversation Bridget and I were having last night. And I said, hold the phone. We just need to record this.
We need to stop this conversation right now and press record.
We do it all the time. Before we dive in, I just want to remind you to sign up to join our tribe on nourishingthemother.com.au. On the front page, you can drop in your email address and name, and once a week you'll get a wrap-up email from us with everything we've put out in the world, with links so you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. Occasionally we'll send you a second email that's just full of an epiphany, awakening, a conversation Bridget and I have, or potentially a toolkit that we've discovered that we think a conscious mama like you might be interested in. So please sign up to join our tribe on nourishingthemother.com.au.
Yes, so it's a juicy topic.
It is. Do we want to hash where it came from?
Yeah, I think we do, and maybe it comes a lot, I think, from you and I in the life stage that we're finding ourselves in terms of witnessing the women around us.
Yeah.
And
in witnessing ourselves.
And how much we can sometimes look back on our behaviours or our interests or our values or the lives that we've led and sort of looked at ourselves as almost like a chameleon, you know, changing ourselves and morphing based on our environment, which is awesome and fine and wonderful. However, sometimes if you're not staying connected to yourself, you can really get led down a road that's not for you. If
you're not grounded in who you are, you can make some pretty shitty choices.
Yeah.
And end up in some pretty shitty situations.
And I think it's part of it. It's like that path of the course that teenagehood takes you on, but that if you're not bringing presence to it as you grow into your 20s and 30s, you can start to look back and go, who am I now? I've just made myself the picture of everybody around me without looking deeply into who I am and who I want to become and the essence of me.
Or maybe you feel cringy or, on a gut level a bit not okay or a bit triggered, but you don't change what you're doing or speak up or show up fully.
Yeah.
I think that's more the camp I sit in. It's a bit like I'm in my own closet. You know?
Yeah, like that is not safe for me it's not safe for me to show this part of me or this part of me or
Yeah, so you're opening and closing different drawers and, is it okay to be all of me?
Yeah.
And that's still a question I ask myself even with all of the toolkits we have and in part that was what you and I were talking about last night was just this concept of showing up, and that when you have your own business, when you're particularly in the entrepreneurial sphere, that you're very much forced into this type of growth, because if you're not completely congruent in who you are, you get, in a way, found out, right? You can't maintain that mask for that period of time to maintain a business.
Yeah, it's one surefire way to get you to be super authentic, because very quickly it will start to unravel if you're not.
Yes, exactly.
But I think it also makes you realise, I mean, certainly in my case, how much I'm not for everyone. Like, the more that you're showing up.
The courage to be disliked, right?
Yeah.
Look back on that podcast.
Yeah, and I mean, quite often my family, extended family, and I love it at Christmas because I kind of, people ask me what I do, and I'm like, I don't even know if I can go into that conversation because it just sounds, how do I explain this, and are you going to understand it, and am I going to be able to communicate that?
Yes, I think that too. I go, oh, well, yeah, I have this podcast.
Yeah.
And these online women's courses. As I'm saying it, I go, for, self-development for mums and conscious women. I'm going, I don't know if this even makes any sense to you.
It's funny, isn't it? And then it's interesting to reflect on how you feel about yourself as you're saying that, and how you, feel about what that person might be perceiving, and whether we need to kind of gloss over things or morph ourselves to fit what we perceive as their view of the world. Like, it's very interesting. I mean, coming from sort of 10 years in corporate, I really noticed that, like, sense of kind of who I was sort of then when I fit the much more socially acceptable, like career kind of scape, versus now where I'm just this renegade. And it's funny, right? Like, to really soften and settle into who we are and making all parts of who we are okay, and recognizing when we have in the past cut parts of ourselves off to fit, you know, a certain space or dynamic that we're in a group or whatever. And I think, I mean, part of it is our, you know, social mores and learning how to communicate with others and learning how to communicate in their language and on some level forging a connection with like-minded topics, which means that you might leave whole things about yourself out because you perceive that they're not going to tune into that. So there is an art, I think, to why we do that as humans. But I guess it's also about sitting with the part of ourselves that isn't comfortable with sharing fully who we are right now.
So what part of you is that for you now?
I think for me it's the self-worth around what I do being worthy of fame and fortune, in inverted commas, you know, like it being worthy of sharing with a really wide audience, because there's a vulnerability there too. Like there's a certain exposure that comes with saying this is who I am and this is what I'm about, and please, you know, be part of my movement, or not if it's not for you as well, and being okay with the people who that's not for. And recognizing that for so many people it won't be for them, but that doesn't mean that we need to dim who we are or what we're about because there'll be people in the world who it's not for, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so if you've come from the paradigm where you really are seeking to be liked by everyone, and you're now, what I'm hearing you saying is, I'm trying to make safe more parts of me to the whole world rather than needing to feel like I have to shut down parts in order to be liked.
Totally, yeah. I mean, and
how are you actually doing that?
Well, particularly for me, because I've really been sitting in the, you know, because this year we're going to be sharing our sensuality and sexuality program, which is super exciting. And
but also we spent all year last year, 2017, talking about it, and you were like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's a real part of me that there's a lot of shame and closed upness around that part of me because of my Catholic indoctrination and lack of an upbringing where that was really pleasure wasn't even part of the conversation ever. You know, and as a segue, I had a fascinating conversation with my husband around what his conversations around sensuality or sexuality were, and they were totally opposite to mine, and he has such a healthier relationship with his sexuality as a result. So I come from this, you know, don't talk about it kind of background. So it's almost like training myself and teaching myself that it's okay to be this person now and to put yourself out there as this person who's expanding in this way and sharing in this way.
So are you practically, would you say you're inwardly parenting yourself?
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, like, and I did a post recently on Facebook page about that. Like I'd stepped into like bras and things.
Yes, I love that.
And I was plunged back to 13-year-old me who didn't feel worthy to be there.
Which I can't even believe because you have a rocking body. Like, it just blows my mind.
No, but like, but I was like straight up and down, not feminine at all. You know, my best friend had boobs. I didn't have boobs. I didn't have a bum. I had nothing. You know, and I felt incredibly like not okay to be there. And you know, really talking about the comparison piece, constantly in comparison to her, which I think is naturally a teenage thing. But I think when we start to do that as adults and we lose ourselves or measure ourselves by the kind of bar that we set based on other people, that is when this disconnection, this shame spiral takes over. And so I was totally back there as a 13-year-old. And I ended up spending so long in the store because it was part of like making it comfortable.
So how were you doing that?
I was trying on different things. I was chatting, you know, with interest in much more probably friendly and deeply with the shop assistants than what I normally would, just because I wanted to feel connected to the place, you know, like to the actual space in there. I spent more time looking at different things and even looking at like the walls of stuff that I might have been a bit prudish about, like as a, you know, younger woman, just to really like almost...
So almost sit in the edge of discomfort for you.
And it was like a repatterning of my nervous system. Like I was conscious that I was doing that in there.
So you're breathing, you're staying still in those areas of those walls that are a bit risque or uncomfortable for you. You're making yourself stay there more and breathe while you're there.
Yeah, noticing which you know, lingerie, or what attitudes I had to certain like lingerie, like and what would be okay in my body and what I would enjoy to wear, and was it for me or was it for my husband, and was it okay to be both of those things, and just really to sit with the dialogue that I was having with myself, and at the same time reparent like the 13-year-old within me and tell her she's okay. Like there was this two-part thing going on, and it was fascinating. And because I had no kids with me, I really had the presence to do that within myself. But I was thinking about it and how many women maybe subconsciously or maybe consciously have these stories around their own sexuality or sensuality that bring up all these feelings in source like that they're really not given space to manage or to work through. So that was a bit of a segue, but that even that piece around being okay with who we are or who we're being is a constant practice within ourselves that I think we need to cultivate and notice the comparison that we might find ourselves on, which is totally the conversation that you and I were having was how much, you know, and we know this from science, we know this from that, you know, you're the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're a product of your environment. But it's when you start to, you know, have the other person in your mind when you're making decisions about yourself, then you're not connected to yourself. Then you're referencing yourself against somebody else to find out what's, you know, right. And it's really not a way to live an aligned life, I wouldn't have said.
No. Or to live a particularly sparky life.
Yeah.
Or connected. You know, I think we'd started this conversation because I was talking about, do you remember the Q&A that I did at your movie? And I was saying to you that I had done a Stoic philosophy practice.
Which I love. Yeah.
I've been listening far too much to Tim Ferriss and his Stoic philosophies. And, I mean, the whole process of Stoic philosophy is really just to strip ego back and to basically create less attachment to things by living in your worst fear and then realising it's not as bad as what you think it is, so you don't need to run from it. You know, I really like that as a concept, because when we're run by fear, we're not able to be bold.
Yes.
And we're not able to groundedly make conscious decisions that are authentic to us because we're running a fear, which is running a belief, which, you know, is all completely subconscious. Anyway, so I was coming up to your Q&A on your panel, and I was feeling a huge amount of self-pressure because this was your movie night and you fucking killed that shit when you were up there on that stage. And I was thinking, Jesus, these are some big boots I've got to fill here. Yeah, I was shitting myself. And then on top of that, it was your story, and I felt a huge amount of pressure to honour that and just pressure on myself. Normal public speaking jitters and, you know, all that stuff. And I happened to have a friend around that day who does a lot of Dharma work. And she goes, what are you so worked up about? And I was like, she's like, what is going through your head when you're up on, you know, when you're speaking? Because I was saying to her, this real issue that my voice starts quaking and then I get more quaky because I'm thinking about the quaking. And like the whole thing is just like it goes completely and I end up in tears. And she goes, what is going through your head when you're there? And I'm like, all I can think about is what do I look like? What do people think of me? Do they like me? Did it, you know? Yeah. And I went through this whole list of just raw what was happening in my head. And she looked at me and she went, it's not about you. And I went, oh my God. There's the freedom. It's actually not about me. Yeah. And all of a sudden I could go, whoa, breathing space, because I had still attached everything, meaning-wise, to what I looked like, what I was perceived, and if everyone in the room liked me or thought I sounded intelligent or not. I had made up all these stories in my head, which were then completely compounding in the moment. And so I made a really conscious choice. I'm like, right, I'm really going to use this as practice then. So I spent that whole 24 hours before your night, every probably 5 seconds, as I'm starting to freak out again, my self-awareness check coming in, it's not about you. And my voice in my head would say it like that, and I'd go, oh yeah. And then my blood pressure would come back down again. And then I'd think about it, go back up, and I'd go, it's not about you. I go, oh yeah. And my blood pressure would come back down again.
Like a goldfish.
Yeah, literally. I did that though. When you're going through a like really intense pattern, that's what it's like. You're totally. Like a goldfish. It's the whole point of an affirmation, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And so then I even stepped it up the next level. So I was like, you're right. It's not about me at all. And so how can I show up as my most authentic self? And so what I decided to do was strip back any form of personal ego that I could attach to, because I felt like if I really let that personal judgment and comparison part of my ego, because ego is all self, so it's light and dark. Yeah. But when we're talking about ego in shadow, it's, you know, the me, the I, the comparison, the I'm better, I'm worse, the judgment factor. And that's really destructive for me, particularly in a public speaking arena. So, and what I connect to that is very much a physical presence. So do I look the part? Have I got makeup on? Is my hair done? Do I, you know, all of these rituals that in some way were putting on a mask every time I got up and lectured at university or got up and spoke anywhere, or, you know, felt adult enough to have conversations with my husband's peers. You know, I would put on a mask, and part of that mask for me was makeup and clothing and hair, so that I looked the part. So it was kind of like fake it till you make it, right? But there's a level of non-authentic self that I had attached to those things. And so I made the conscious choice to completely be without them, to be completely bare. So if I had no makeup, if I wore the clothes that I had worn all day that I didn't change out of, and if I didn't do my hair, then I was in my worst nightmare, because everyone would see me in my full ugliness.
Which I must say, you looked amazing. But yes, okay, keep going.
Thanks. But in my head, that's my worst nightmare, right?
I get that.
So I literally threw myself into my worst nightmare and stripped back anything I could attach that type of ego to.
Yeah, wow.
And what happened was I walked up onto your stage and I said to myself, it's not about you. And as soon as I really realized that in that moment, I thought, I'm standing here in front of a room, a theatre full of people who are here to some extent listen to what I have to say. And I have no makeup on, and I have no hair, and I'm wearing clothes I've worn all day that's probably got baby chuck all over them. And I'm here and I'm safe.
Yeah, wow.
And you know what? I feel really authentic and really grounded. And as soon as I could eliminate that ego mind chatter, that comparison that was in my head, guess what happens? It's like a seesaw. Your heart opens. And I think we spend so long in our head that it's like a head-heart seesaw. I really think like that it is. And so when we do mindfulness practices and come to a moment, we realize there's nothing missing in a moment, right? But we only do that by switching off the comparison in our head, the monkey mind.
Yeah.
And so this practice for me was shedding back everything I could and making it not about me at all, by removing any I'm not sure what the word is, safe cruxes, I suppose, that previously my ego could have just, you know, held on to.
Yeah, or hid behind.
Yeah. And it was just the most liberating experience for me, Bridget. Honestly, I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that.
And you nailed it. Like, it was so, some of your questions and your comments or your facilitation was like so on point. It was fantastic.
Well, thanks. That's a relief to hear. But really, I'm just more grateful that I had the opportunity.
Wow.
So, you know, thank you. And so I just think I spent all my life trying to be something, right? Trying to be beautiful, trying to be sexy, trying to be, I don't know, intelligent, trying to be loving, trying to be perceived this way. And really what it is not trying to be anything, but making safe what those trying to be things are trying to escape from.
So making safe the parts of you that you're trying to hide through trying to be something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is in essence so much of what we're trying to do with our children when we look at consciously parenting them too. In making safe the parts of themselves that they also want to hide from. You know, like the parts that they don't want to share because they're too painful. But in order to make them safe for them, we have to make those parts that we want to hide from safe for us, on whatever that looks like for us, which is a beautiful example that you've just given.
Yeah.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It's really powerful. And I just keep thinking about all of these little practices, which, you know, I really hope we bring to the Loathing to Loving program and then extenuate out into our sexuality course that we want to run this year. But these almost, I hate the word mindfulness because I think it's overused.
It's so overused. But I mean, it's really, it's true, right? Like it's bringing you back to presence within how you are utilizing your mind, how you are allowing your mind to perceive your world and yourself in that world.
Exactly. And how when we to allow ourselves to blossom, like we talk about in Loathing to Loving, to open up those petals, to show up and to transform. You know, it's more than peeling back layers. Often it's not even that we have to remove them, it's just we have to open them up and create more space in them and create the softness and the dewiness around them, and, you know, just breathe into opening more of that up rather than feeling like something has to be shed or gotten rid of.
It's such an evolution.
We know it's easy to lose yourself in motherhood.
To be tapped out and touched out, to forget who you are and what you're worthy of, to fall short of the mother you thought you should be.
Ouch. Hey.
This is why we created the Loathing to Loving program.
We want you to open up, to show up and transform what you believe is possible for you as a woman and as a mother, because you're both, and we don't want you to give up one in order to be the other.
For $249, you'll spend 5 weeks online with us with lifetime access to 4 modules where we give you the toolkit for understanding what's happening in your world and how to transform it.
You can pay in full, or we have just instigated payment plans, which means you can make 3 simple payments, one of $49 at sign up and 2 $100 payments over 2 months, if that is going to make it easier in your world.
Yes. So come and blossom with us.
Open up, show up and transform.
As we mentioned at the beginning, like Jules and I have noticed lots of transformations and shifts in the women around us. And it's really important to recognise, to support and love and hold our friends on their journeys, but also not expect that we need to have that same kind of expression through what we value. Because if we try to make ourselves in the mold of someone else, or try to make ourselves do things that person's doing because that seems to be the right way,
the way they're doing it,
the way that they're doing it, we can lose ourselves by degrees, and sometimes find ourselves very, very lost from who we in essence are. Because the reality is, anything that we're seeing in somebody else, we have. But it's in our own unique way. It's in our own unique form, and most of the pain that we, and the pain of the comparison that we feel with others, is because we are perceiving that we're either too humble, like whatever we see in them, we're either too humble to admit we've got, or we're too proud to admit we've got, and so we judge, we compare, we take up valuable emotional space in our mind, trying to decide whether we're better or worse than people around us based on the life we're living and what we value. But as you know, I've both seen with, people expanding in business, or, transforming their family life, or, letting go of homes or partnerships, relationships. It's really important that we have a way to come back to what's true for me right now. What's important to me right now.
I think we could break this down even just in terms of motherhood and business, which are probably 2 areas we focus on in this tribe. Just being, you can watch the way another mother parents, and you can start to think you should be doing it that way, or that's the way to do it, or why aren't you doing it that way? And you can watch a friend in business or work life, and they're doing it that way, and you think, well, I have to do it that way, or that's the way I should be doing it, or why aren't I doing it that way?
Or that's the only way, or that's the only way to be successful.
Yes, it's the only way to be successful. It's the only way to earn money for my family. It's the only way to have a sleeping baby.
Yeah.
I think we can do a lot of these comparisons, and just to break it down, because I think the language can get a bit heady if you're not kind of immersed in it, like in the course. And I still want you to get something out of this. So it's just really looking at those things that we think we start to use always and never language, or we should or we shouldn't. Those sorts of words that really say we're living out of our true voice.
Yeah, and it's almost like a moralizing component within us that's making us try to fit this paradigm of right or wrong, or good or bad, or really a black and white way to live, which is not in essence us. It's an injection, that we've gathered from the world around us that we're trying to make us, which is futile.
And when you come back in, I want to say, when we come back into the moment as well, everything is there, right? So it's only when we start to future project, we start to cast our mind so far in the future that we realize that we start to get into anxiety and overwhelm states and perceive that something is missing. If we come into the moment, we realize it's all actually whole anyway. just the form might be different. So you can have a huge amount of abundance, but might be in a different form, a different expression. You can have a huge amount of time and spaciousness in one area, but it'll just be in a different expression in somebody else's. And when we start to really push ourselves to do something that doesn't feel deeply aligned, we start to really get cracks in our coping abilities and in our ability to shine, in the pizzazz that we bring to our family or to our work or to our relationship. It starts to get eaten away.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to explain it, because it's true, and it's almost, it's that feeling of, you know, me being eaten away or lethargy or just challenge is because it's like an internal wrestle, whether you're conscious of it or not, because it's like you're trying to be something that you are not, and that there's a part of you that's resisting that, and that saps our vitality and it saps our enthusiasm for life.
That's not to say that it's an easy ride, though.
Absolutely,
right?
no.
So we expect resistance and we expect challenge.
Yeah.
So what do you want to tease that out?
Yeah, and I mean, there's this whole idea, because there's so much talk at the moment about how bad stress is or whatever, but there's a kind of stress, like eustress, which is fantastic for us, and we tend to lean into that kind of stress the higher the thing is that's causing the stress is on our values, right? Like, so you and I, you know, can sit with our kids and some of their big feelings like for ages, because we really value what we know comes on the other side. Or you and I can lean into the discomfort stuff in our relationships because we have a super high value on relationships. But so that's like a stress that we kind of on some level are open to. But there are other stresses or other things that we shut down to because they're not important enough for us, based on what's important to us in our life and what it's demonstrating to tackle. You know, like we all have a conservation within our lives of control and chaos, or order and chaos. Yep. And the areas that we have the most order, we're more able to lean into challenge and accept it as a, you know, part of the path that we're on. Where we're resisting those things is kind of where we've got the chaos. It's where everything's not getting done. It's just kind of like lower priority. We think we should, but we haven't, you know, all that kind of stuff. And everyone has those things going on in their lives. But it's when we start to understand why they're there and how we can empower those through seeing how they do serve us as opposed to take away from us, is when we get to have greater mastery. And it's through this conversation that we have in Leading to Loving in week 1 around values that we start to understand what our own ones are and those values of the people around us, so that we can better communicate to them and get everybody's needs met through like more of a win-win scenario, as opposed to somebody having to lose.
Yeah. And then I also think when we're coming back to that comparison that something has to be one way and trying to force yourself to do it that one way when it doesn't feel congruent to who you are, that can be really detrimental. I think you'll often find that there is never one way. I honestly believe anything is possible in this world, really. And it's just our beliefs that say that it's not. Yeah. So if it's just our beliefs, which is just us, then when we workshop those beliefs, we're able to transform what our reality actually even is. And that's how we become the person for whom that form or that thing that we're seeking starts to awaken.
Yeah, or that dream is possible to then manifest. Yeah. I love the quote, I don't know where it's from, but it's like, the sky's not the limit, your belief system is. Because until you address the underlying beliefs that's in the way of what you think that you really want in the world, you'll never get what you really want, because there's something blocking it, whether it's the values that don't align or the beliefs that you have, whether you can or can't.
Or maybe we do.
Yeah,
like
true.
We really stopped and asked ourselves, where did that come from? Or we stopped to have a think about that feeling and what is the belief that aligns with that feeling, and then ask, where did I learn that? Who did I learn that from? Where did that come from? I think it's very easy to make those dots. I think I was having this conversation today actually with my friend, who we were talking about the why. And sometimes we can have these really big things happen in our life that are emotionally really kind of jolting to our system, a big fight, a big argument, a big catharsis of some sort. And we can spend a whole life, why? And I was saying to her, but if I just knew the why, I feel like I could deal then. You know, like if I just knew the why, then I could like workshop that and I'd be okay.
You need to bring some strategy to it.
That's right. And she said to me very poignantly, she said, but it's not about the why. And if you come back to the now, and if you sit in the feeling that you've got right now, you'll know the answer. And I was like, yeah, of course. Yeah, you've spoken absolute truth. And I love how when we know we've heard truth because our whole body kind of vibrates and like goes, I know that's truth.
It landed.
And it's what we do. We just practice, take a breath. What does it feel like? What does it look like? What is it, what's its texture? What's its color? What's its, personality of that feeling? Where is it in my body? What meaning have I attached to it? What thought have I got that I'm running as I'm feeling it? Like when we actually bring a bit of self-awareness to the moment, we automatically know those answers. Where have I learnt that before? Where have I seen this before? Where have I felt this before? Who's done this to me before? I think when we come back to the moment rather than the asking for this big why, when we come back to just the feeling right now, it's again like the layers that open because you come back to the now, you get what you need right now as an answer. Then you get the next feeling and you ask the question again, and you'll get the next feeling and you ask the question again.
That line of questioning is so important because ultimately it leads us back to the original feeling, which you can then look for the bigger picture of why that's playing out for you.
Exactly.
And shift it.
But you probably couldn't understand the bigger picture if you asked for the why now.
Yeah.
And you wanted to skip the 10 steps before you got to the why. I don't know that you'd really have an integrated depth and grounded understanding or an empathetic opening of your heart space with gratitude. I think that comes when you've stepped through where you're at to get there.
One of the key reasons I think in the culture that we live in is this desire to be something is because we are bathed in this version of success, perhaps this societal version of success, career success, family success, work success, life success. And, it's like reaching some kind of pinnacle. But the reality is everybody has success in their own unique form. Everybody has success in the areas of life that are most important to them because it's likely to be where you're going to be most fulfilled. And success sometimes doesn't always look like it might be packaged up to look, in the press or in the advertising. But if we ask ourselves where we're most fulfilled and whether we would swap that level of fulfillment in that area of life for some other area of life that we might think we should have, that's when we start to really go, actually, I have much more gratitude right now for my version of success or my version of who I am, what I want to be. Because we can spend our whole lives trying to be something other than we're not, or chase something, some elusive dream. But if it's not, congruent with the essence of who we are and what we're about and what moves us, then we're really selling ourselves short. And I think on some level we're dimming our capacity to show up for those that we love too if we're always trying to fit some kind of mold, like some elusive mold.
I think you end up being hollow. I think that's why we see so many self-sabotaging patterns in those that are in inverted commas highly successful.
Yeah.
Because it's one form that perhaps isn't authentic to their life design fulfillment. Or they've pushed themselves to achieve this one particular version of success, but at the expense of...
Yeah, or maybe it was because, it was some dogged belief of their father that they should do this, and so they've gone that hammer on tongue and achieved that, and then they're like, okay, well, who am I now? And you see so many of those kinds of scenarios play out, and really high levels of society too. And I think at what cost, right? Like, and when we come back into appreciation for our own being just as we are and our own version of success just as it is, there's an enormous sense of I don't know, like just deep presence and humility and contentment with who we are.
But I think that's that whole thing I was saying of coming back to the present right now. There's nothing missing right now. If I'm looking at, my house needs a renovation and it's falling apart, and, I wish I had more money. I wish I had, whatever. Yeah. And then you just take a breath in this moment and just feel into what you do have right now. Nothing's missing. You've got plenty of abundance. You've got plenty of, all those things you perceive as missing. Nothing. When you're right there in that present moment, there's nothing. I think it's the comparison and the outdated beliefs and the drive into future thought rather than present thought that creates the overwhelm.
And I think, you know, as humans, we are designed to have this kind of balance of striving to be, do, and have certain things. But when that becomes out of balance and off kilter and becomes defined by the lives of others or the beliefs of others, is when it's not authentic to us. I think it's natural to want to grow, like we're programmed to grow, but what we want to do is find a way to grow and be enthusiastic and vital about the growth that we're seeking. That's us. It's not someone else's version of what that should be.
I totally think that. There was a woman actually who's a friend of mine from school who did our aligned parenting course last time. And she said, I'd kind of watched this stuff pop up, and then I put this post up where I'd met, remember I met my mother from another parallel universe. Do you remember that post?
Oh, I loved that.
And at the end of that, I'd kind of, in essence met her and was feeling just like, yes, because this was the message from the universe I needed, that what I valued most in life, which was family, which I was undervaluing because it doesn't provide money, was in fact the very source of my fulfillment. And if I have a yearning to that, then dive into it and open it up, because there is life purpose and contentment and riches in such a heartfelt, soulful way that just earning an extra $1,000 wouldn't give me, right?
Yes.
And my friend had read that and she said to me, and it was when I saw, if you have a calling towards parenting, and she said, I was judging myself, or I was thinking, oh, what a, Minnie Nancy, sit at home, Nana, or how ridiculous, they're going to be fine, or, she'll be right, I turned out fine.
Yeah.
And she said, I saw that post of yours and I went, no, I do have this yearning that my parenting is really precious and I want to invest myself and more of myself in it. And that's why she took the dive into our course. And I just thought that's what it is though, right? It's about the things that you are passionate about are not random.
No, exactly. And I think it's so true. I love that you highlighted that, because so many times I've gone, why do I care so much about this when it seems like the rest of the world doesn't? That's not a reason not to. It's never a reason not to, because there's a part of you that is yearning for you to grow and empower and make change and serve the world with what it is that you feel so called to and inspired to do and to value. And I mean, I think parenting is such a great example, because yes, everyone has kids, and yes, it's just a thing that's done. But if it's inspiring for you to communicate or value how you speak to your kids in a certain way, then honour that. But also don't expect the rest of the world to care about it either, because if we're expecting the rest of the world to care about it, then we're spending too much time thinking about what others think and not enough presence with ourselves on growing intentionally for us, for no other purpose but for ourselves.
And we're back full circle to our validation and self-worth. Our self-worth coming from the validation of those external to us, which will also be a childhood pattern.
That's right.
As opposed to really strengthening that internal, soulful, grounded voice of I am enough as I am, without needing to be something or perceived as something or seen as something, that I am just enough as I am. And I think that's such a strong practice, and I think you meet the most profound women in that space, because everyone lights up in that space, and the more we light up, the more those around us light up.
It's a really heart-opening space to be in. And I mean, in the women's work that you and I have immersed in, there's such a depth. It's like you find the wellspring of the ancestral women before us when you show up in that way. It's really just profound.
Deep sense of groundedness. So we give you full permission to just be.
Yes.
As you are, in a full spectrum, seen by all around you. Which is as much a practice for us.
Yeah.
So, I have this pocket where I get to put this part of myself in nourishing the mother. But I would say I shut down a bit of that pocket when I come into like mainstream school circles. I don't think I'm as open about parenting choices or conscious living choices or even thought processes. So I'm working on that this year. I'm working on making more of that okay. And I only in my own head have made that not okay and shut that part down of me, because I perceive that if I do open that up, that they'll perceive that I'm judging them.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because it's tricky, because how do you, and I haven't nailed this yet, because I think I've definitely sat in the judging, all of this is the right way.
I have, and that's exactly my point, because I've come from that kind, same as you.
Yeah.
And now we've done this work, we get to this point where we're like, we can't judge it, because there is literally no right or wrong. And it doesn't matter what you choose, there's going to be drawbacks and benefits. And so all of these beautiful mums are, I literally don't judge the way that they parent, because I don't think that any of us are going to get it all right or all wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, who has a real answer, right?
No, no one. So, but because of that, I then go, well, I don't need to say that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need to bring that. Well, they don't need to hear that from me. It's okay for them to just be that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've sat there too, and I'm like, but so at what point, though, is that not me?
Exactly.
And at what point is that me not showing up as myself? Though,
exactly.
then?
That is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So when you figure that out, 'cause I'm still figuring that out.
But I think it's this whole thing of like you were doing in the bra shop.
Yeah.
Like you were doing, of looking at that wall of discomfort and just lingering, leaning in a little bit longer and breathing into it and saying it's safe to be here. I think it's that as a practice that we do in all of those areas of life where we feel a little bit discomfortable, I was about to say. We feel a bit of discomfort.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I was sitting with you doing your post of courage this year.
Yeah, courage. Yeah.
The courage to show up and be seen. And I was thinking that's what I want to do this year, is just have the courage to be fully seen by those that I care most deeply about, because it's far harder to be fully seen by those we care deeply about or whose opinions we care deeply about than the masses that we don't know.
That's true. Absolutely.
So I think it actually starts really intimately in the relationships closest to you, and then it kind of flows out rather than it being the other way. I don't think you have to show up for the world and then everyone else will just around you will like you or not. I actually think it's the opposite.
Yeah, I think it's far more courageous to actually deeply show up for those most intimate, because they're the ones we fear rejection from the most.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't really fear rejection from people you don't particularly care about.
No, and who are the closest mirrors.
Yeah.
So who bring up all of our triggers, who, you know, show us the facets of ourselves we're not willing to see. You know, so that's what I'm working on too this year. So I really invite you to also be courageous, like Bridget.
I love it. No, it's a big leap, but sure. Working on it, right? Working on it. So we would love to invite you to please connect with us online, nourishingthemother.com.au. And if you're loving the podcast and haven't rated us yet on iTunes or on Facebook, we would love you to do that too, so more people can find us.
Yeah, I'll leave a review.
Yeah.
Please contact us if you ever, you know, have a really strong response to a podcast. We love to hear that, because, gosh, that makes us go, the ripples this is going out, because we have no idea.
Yeah.
We love to hear topics you're interested in, so we can hopefully feed more of that to you. You know, I was saying to Bridget, I work much better off of a question than I work off of just trying to theorize a topic.
Yeah.
So if you have a question, I would love to hear it, because we would love the opportunity to actually go where you're really feeling a need, but also it's much easier for us to give practical tools and tips, which we're really big about, rather than theory when we have a direct question. So please email us, shoot it through the website, or contact us on private message on Facebook or Instagram. So nourishingthemother.com.au or Nourishing the Mother, Instagram, Facebook.
And to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And you, Bridget?
suburbansandcastles.com.
And your next movie?
Yeah, it's in February in Melbourne and Geelong, and it's called Rise. So we had the premiere of this is the road trip documentary film. We had the premiere last year, so have got another screening this year, and it's with the founder of one of the co-founders of Endota Spa, which is pretty exciting.
She's gorgeous.
And also Tina Tao, who's another entrepreneur. So yeah, going to be a really awesome discussion there. So if you're in Melbourne or Geelong in February or March, we'd love to see you.
Perfect. So remember, you've got to nourish the mother to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
P.S. We just did it. Woo!
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.